This is my garden report for July the 5th, 2020. Decided to start making these videos about the same time every year. I was back looking at the 2018 video that I had done, and my garden back then was way ahead of where it is now. But I think this year is just a little bit later. It's been a little bit wetter and it was colder a little bit later, and I noticed even the field corn, the farmers are behind where they were 2 years ago. So but everything looks very healthy. In fact, the garden looks much healthier, or cleaner anyway, than it did 2 years ago. 2 years ago, my corn was about shoulder high in tasseling. My tomatoes were chest high, and so I figure I'm about 3 weeks behind where that was. But I was also behind last year, and everything produced really well. I'm not really worried about it. So this is my strawberries. We got quite a few strawberries off of the first row. That was about the only row I had that was had any plants in it. These other rows, I put them out last year. They were new plants, these two, but the rabbits or something got in and snipped the plants off. So I ordered some more, 25 more plants this spring, and put them out, and they're all doing very healthy. And I got the strawberry patch cleaned out last week, and got you go through and you mow off all the tops after they're done bearing fruit, and they'll start putting off new foliage and start storing energy into the crowns for next year. So those all look very good. And then something I've struggled with every other year is growing onions. But this year is different. My onions actually look really well. That batch is the second batch I put out. This is the first batch I put out. They're like a long day onion. There's a long day and a short day onion. And then, of course, at the end of the year, you pull them up and you kind of cure them in a dry area, and they should store for most of the winter. I've got 6, 7 rows of sweet corn here. It all looks pretty healthy. I was looking at my journal from last year, and I think it was about the middle of August before we actually harvested any corn last year, so probably about on the same track as last year. And we had real good production. This is a strain called Ambrosia, and it's a really sweet corn. It germinated really well, came up pretty uniformly. Just about all the plants germinated. I had to go through and thin them out. So that's looking good. My green beans, I got 4 rows here. Those are looking very, very nice and healthy. I've got 9 tomato plants. The 2 far ones over there in the corner are Rutgers, and I think these are early girls. I got Big Boy, which are like a beefsteak tomato, and then Brandywines. I decided to put these out again this year, even though last year I wasn't that impressed with them. They produced okay, and they tasted okay, but I thought the core of the tomato was kind of pretty hard core. The core was hard and just wasn't, you wasted a lot of the tomato just getting the core out of it. I don't remember what variety that is. And all these plants, the tomato plants, I started those all from seed. So those are looking really nice and healthy, much better than they were last year. Last year my tomatoes were down at that end and they got flooded. One thing I'm started trying to do this year, instead of tilling everything flat and then putting furrows in and then putting the seeds in the furrow and covering them up, if you do that, then your garden is just pretty much flat and your plants are right at ground level. This year I started planting in ridges, so I use Dad's old hand plow and make a ridge, and then I plant into the ridge. And so if we do get a heavy rain and there's water standing on the garden, the water is in between the rows and not, basically not, the plants are not down in the water. And then after I till, I'll run the plow down through there and just keep mounding it up a little more each time. And that seems to work very well. I'm gonna try a couple watermelons this year. I've got watermelons coming up there. My pumpkins are just going crazy. I got 3 plants there. This is the same trellis I grew on last year. And I may wind up pulling up one plant because I think 3 plants are just going to overwhelm that trellis. But if I get a couple pumpkins off of it, that's good enough. I mean, I'm probably pretty much doing that more as a novelty as anything, because we're not big pumpkin eaters, but they are just kind of fun to grow. And we did save some, make some pumpkin. Laura made pumpkin bread, and I think we made a pumpkin pie out of it last year. Just kind of framed in some dirt here and put some flowers, zinnias and marigolds out. They're just coming up. And then this is my second planting of corn here. 3, 4, 5 rows of that. Still the ambrosia corn. And then 4 rows of more beans. It looks like there's a lot of grass coming up in there. I got to get out here and get the weeds and grass out of it. This is my first year with the raised beds, and I've kind of had mixed success with them. I'm going to have to work with the soil, and I'm not sure what the nutrients in the soil is. I'm going to have a soil test done. Some of the stuff is done well. The beets, I seem to be having trouble getting beets to grow. I did get a couple plants coming up there. That's kale. Even though there's 2 full rows of beets and 2 full rows of kale there, I just got a few plants that in. These are icicle radishes. There are some carrots in there. They're not doing great either, but you can see some little carrots. See, the plant is just not very big yet, but I suppose they'll make something. It's the first year I've ever grown carrots. And these are my cucumbers. I just got the trellis out tonight. I've got 6 plants in there. So I'm hoping the pickles seemed to be a big hit last year with the grandkids and other family members, the kids and myself. Joe doesn't like them. My peppers are kind of mixed. These 2 plants here I bought, and they were looking real nice, and then we had the hailstorm and just kind of pretty much shredded those, but they're coming back. I'm trying to keep the blooms picked off of these until they get a little bit bigger. And my other pepper plants, I got some jalapenos and banana peppers in there. Those 2 plants are the only ones that I purchased. Everything else in here I started from seed. So there's peppers. And I put this screen on top to use as kind of a shade cloth to knock down some of the sun intensity, so the sun just doesn't blister the plants quite so bad. And the carrots and the broccoli really seem to like it. I mean, not the carrots, the cabbage. Got a couple nice cabbage plants. There's a smaller one and I've kind of started these at different intervals so that I will have kind of cabbage coming along for several weeks. We've already clipped the head out of my broccoli plant. And there's another broccoli plant. Cilantro. Oh, and something I didn't grow last year were potatoes, and I've got 6 rows of potatoes. There's 3.5 rows of Kennebecs and 2.5 rows of Yukon Gold, and I'm really happy with those. They're looking very, very healthy. I've had to dust them with the diatomaceous earth. I've had some flea beetles on there kind of eating up the foliage, so that's what the white stuff is on there. And that's about it. Like I said, I've had a couple of probably just learning pains with the raised beds, how to best utilize them. But for the most part, my garden is, like I said, it's a little bit later than everyone else's garden. Definitely later than it was in 2018, but everything looks really nice and healthy. And we got some sunflowers over there. You can kind of planted them over there out of the way this year. So that's it.